Buonasera, buonasera a tutti. Sono molto lieta di essere stata invitata alla vostra conferenza a fare un piccolo saluto e intervento. È stato Franco Castelli che è un amico e collega da qualche tempo. Voglio parlare un po' delle cose che mi sono venute in mente dopo aver letto questo libro durante la notte, tutta la notte oggi, perché mi è arrivato solamente ieri sera per una serie di contrattempi che Franco Castelli conosce. Allora, il libro stesso di Costantino Nigra, Canti popolari del Piemonte, curato da Franco Castelli, Emilio Iona e Alberto Lovato, è un'opera tremenda, lo sappiamo tutti. La sua completezza, la sua chiarezza, tutto, ogni dettaglio visto e rivisto. Sarà come una Bibbia per del canto narrativo piemontese e canti popolari, dico. E sono fiera che mio padre, Alan Lomax, abbia potuto contribuire a alcune fotografie, che ha fatto in Piemonte alcune registrazioni, forse anche, non sono sicura, al CD. Non credo che Diego Carpitella è stato con lui in quel momento, però forse mi sbaglio. Mi sono venute in mente una ipotesi, una serie di piccole ipotesi sul posto del canto narrativo nella early modern era in Europe. Now parlerò in inglese, mi scusate. E poi mi scusate per un'altra cosa, non conosco i fonti e non sono una specialista per niente, sono praticamente ignorante sul motivo del canto popolare al nord Italia o al centro. E allora se io dico qualcosa, qualche stupidaggine o qualcosa che qualcun'altra persona ha già detto, mi scusate. Quindi, when the ballad came into being for maybe beginning in the 9th century to the 15th and coming into full flower in the 16th, as I understand it. Well, it makes a lot of sense that it happened then, because Europe was going through tremendous transformation during this whole period, and it really came to a climax in the 16th century. And this was because originally kind of started with a moldboard plow. You're going to laugh at me. And the rainfall of Europe and the deep soils that made it possible to use and to invent and use the moldboard plow, which was able to cut deeply into the soil and therefore and work much faster, and therefore create a new system of agricultural production, which was the integration of animal husbandry into the growing of seed crops and other kinds of crops in a really closed and very rich and productive system, which then created really big surpluses and then called for trade and commerce, and people began to move into towns and so on. Moldboard was invented. Slicher von Bath wrote a whole book on this fascinating thing in the 5th century, I believe, and it took a while for all this to build up. Anyway, so what happens in the 16th century and onward is the development of a world systems-based political economy. That means that it was the larger political economy that was the driving force of everything in Europe, rather than single countries or baronies or whatever, or any kind of entity. And everything belonged to that, maybe with the exception of Spain. I don't know. So these ideas were promulgated by Emanuel Wallerstein, as you may know, and Terence Hopkins and a couple of other historians. So what did this mean, and what does it have to do with the ballad? Well, it meant that, people had to be free. They had to have freedom of movement and freedom of choice in many respects, more than they had ever had, both in order to function in the marketplace, either as laborers in it or as dealers or whatever. And also it was, as I said, it was really international. And so, and of course the so-called discoveries were then happening. And it was all kind of a piece. So the ballad is really an expression and a reflection of this situation in some ways, even though the stories may have been antique in some senses, or old-fashioned in a way. But actually, they were showing many new features of society and interaction and gender issues as well. So the ballad expresses this internationalism as well, because in them people are often moving about a great deal, and the King of France over here is affecting the fortunes of a girl over there, and so on and so forth. And you have this sense of big movement and exchanges between people of different countries and so on. And it meant that I think that common people also were well aware of this new situation and were participating in it. So what else? There are certain themes and aspects of ballad content that also reflect this. For example, there is dialogue in many of them. And the dialogue, what is that? They are negotiations, almost always. One person and another person trying to get the better of the other in a negotiation over something. If you do this, I'll do that. And seeing who can best the other. And that is a sine qua non skill in the marketplace and in any kind of, I suppose, unfettered existence, because people are not saying you must do this. No, it is I will do this if you do that. Okay, and the other thing that is very evident is that women are not doing what they're supposed to do. And they are part of these negotiations too, very often. Their voice is heard, and they are, and Tullio Magrini has written about this, the agency of women in the ballad. And it's absolutely true and evident. And they also break out of the old patriarchal restrictions and decide they are going to do some very unconventional things. And some of them have to do with sex and taking lovers and so on. So you have that aspect as well. And then, well, you know, there's you see it throughout, you know, many of these ballads that I was reading last night, and I was so struck by the fact that I realized that the death of women in these ballads was a form of rebellion as well. It was like they were saying, no, I will die rather than do what you say, or do what, or submit to some life that I don't want to have. And this is what happens in Carolina. She does not want to go to Saxony. She does not want to leave her home, but she has to do this. And so what does she do? She dies right away when she gets there in a year. So yes, and by the way, I had an aunt, a great aunt in Texas, Caroline, and she died in the same way as a kind of protest, because Texas society was extremely straight-laced and repressive in many ways at that time. Excuse me. So then, what do we have left? We have also the structure of the ballad and the form and its details. And here I'm going to refer to Alan Lomax, because he talked about this, and it was a very innovative idea that people have not really picked up on. And that is that the form of the ballad, that is a simple strophe, which does not have much variation, if any, with a refrain, that is some repetition that underlines and underscores the theme or the narrative, and makes it more memorable and more learnable. And it has rather simple melodies, as I said, and moderate everything, moderate vocal stance, intervals, dynamics, not too fast, not too slow. It has clear enunciation of consonants so you can hear what people are saying. It's usually a solo singer, maybe with a chorus, but it's always a solo. And the ethos, you know, is for people to listen. So the audience is kind of part of the ballad in a way, or audience is part of this sort of solo pattern, you know, in the sense that it is listening attentively. So excuse the noise here. And so it has very little ornament, no ornament, in fact. Yeah, I think so. It's a vehicle in that way. It's like Alan said, it was a little package for holding information like news and things, stories, and themes and ideas of importance. So that was the perfect vehicle that came into being during this period. And it was easy to learn. It was easy to pass on to other people, which made it more spreadable in the world. And so I guess that's about it. That's all I have to say. I hope I didn't take up too much time. And thank you so much for having me. Bye.